Hey, it's Eric Newcomer. Welcome to the Newcomer Podcast. Or maybe it's Dead Cat this week. We've got Tom Dotan, our old co-host, back on the show. A little bit like old times. We also invited Katie Notopoulos, the former BuzzFeed reporter who's been posting up in a storm on Threads. And we got into the war between Elon Musk's Twitter and Mark Zuckerberg's new Threads app, which has been taking off. And we dig into the future of the real-time battle royale forum for worldwide discussion and where Threads fits into it. It was a fun, lighthearted episode about the state of a key consumer company. And then at the tail end, we talked a little bit about Tom's reporting at the Journal and the downturn in tech. Give it a listen. Hey, everybody. Welcome to... this is a Dead Cat episode, right? We have the Newcomer Podcast, as we've been calling it more recently. Lots of brand confusion going on. Tom Dotan, who abandoned the podcast to go work at the Wall Street Journal, is back. Apparently, his editors think it's now safe for him to make an appearance, Tom.
It took a couple months, but I had to get clearance from high-level masthead people to appear, but I'm here. I've been given strict instructions. Yeah.
What, a good Benioff story under your belt. They're like, all right, he's in the cult enough.
I'm indoctrinated enough that I'm coming here as a representative of the Journal and not as a defected member of Dead Cat. Yeah, that's right.
And then we've got Katie Notopoulos, ex-BuzzFeed, right? Also, recently, I think, announced she stepped down as editor-in-chief of Threads. She's been long-running for the history of this short-lived social media site bit, pretending to be the editor-in-chief of Threads. Katie, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. But Eric, unfortunately, I was personally fired by Mark Zuckerberg.
Oh, yeah,
I didn't resign.
Was that like via DM, like Thread DM, or does he call you? Where does he go about firing people? He's been good at it this year. There's been lots of firings at Meta, but...
I don't think I addressed this. In my bit, I said I was going to a meeting with him. I don't think I specified in person or over Zoom. But, I guess because, I'm on the East Coast, he's in, San Francisco. I guess it must have been a Zoom firing.
Probably Hawaii, but yeah.
We had a huddle before the podcast started about whether we would do this bit as a sincere bit and decided us left for the Threads. Obviously, like the news story here is, Facebook, Meta, whatever we're calling them, has come on the scene super strong with this Twitter competitor. Tom, have you spent any
I'm on Threads.
With it? Yeah.
I've done 2 threads so far. If Katie was trying to be the editor-in-chief of Threads, I was trying to be the cat turd 2 of Threads. and I posted that they have been shadow banning me and ghost banning me, and I'm not getting the engagements that I previously had seen on my threads. And everybody took it seriously and said, like, is there something wrong here? And then Alex Heath suggested that I add a profile photo. That's why I'm not getting the engagement I expected. So yeah, I've not done well on Threads so far, but I am on it. Yeah.
You were never large on Twitter in the first place. So if anything, this is your chance to like.
Yeah, that was not my medium. I'm no Katie Notopoulos or Newcomer for that matter. I never succeeded really on Twitter, but I don't think Threads is going all that much better for me. It's not like this is a fresh page, although I do have my name because I was stuck with my stupid, 2010 or whatever Twitter name, City of the Town. And then because it chooses your Instagram handle.
The City of the Town is an LA reference, and you're a San Francisco. You have a house in San Francisco. So
I don't even want to explain. I don't even want to explain what the reference is. But anyway,
it is LA, right?
No, it's not. It's from the Bay Area. Is the reference?
I'm an idiot.
It's fine. Mad. Okay. Well, either way.
I don't even know what
but it pulls your Instagram name, right, for your Threads handle, I believe, right? Everyone and a lot of people have kind of bullshit Instagram handles too. So there are people that I think were unexpectedly stuck with that as their Threads name.
Katie, what is yours?
This is Cadence. I have the one upside to having like a really hard to spell unusual last name is that I never have competition on any platform for getting my real name. I don't have to be captured too. I can be just captured.
Yeah,
I've befriended the other Eric Newcomer. He lives in Manhattan. He's sort of tech adjacent. I've been over to his house for a beer tasting. So
so you've met? Wow.
Oh yeah, we at least socialize. I've been like, I think twice now. Now we're just, so it's hysterical dinner party where I have to explain to people my name is also Eric Newcomer. Anyway, I want to sort of get like the vibe of Threads, and later on in the episode we can talk about the real, like, I don't know, Twitter Threads war. You had a funny tweet about, or sorry, they're not tweets. What are they? They're posts?
I think they're posts. So what, the official Instagram account gave a dictionary that I think you would call a conversation a thread. Like, I was reading some interesting threads that Eric was talking about, but an individual post is called a post. And then instead of a retweet, it's a repost.
What did you think was going on there? I found this super strange that they were dictating like what language they want people to do. I couldn't tell if they were worried people were going to start using like tweet and they didn't want to encourage people to just like embrace.
I sort of took it as that was literally people were asking that.
Right.
That people were like, what do we call them? Do we call, because they're not tweets. Do we call them retweets? What do we call them? Do we call, and I think that the worst case scenario was, I feel like a lot of people were joking about you would call them threats.
Right.
Which is probably not what they want.
Right.
So I think it was just kind of a like.
I mean, people are having too much fun with wordplay, which I'm generally against. But there's a lot of like, your followers or your thread count type tweets.
Right. Yeah.
So there's a lot of like, people keep comparing it to like, a new summer camp where, everybody's sort of jokey and like trying to come up with like the lingo that will rule the platform.
Yeah. And I also think it's really worth remembering that like, I mean, obviously it's been a lot more people than they even anticipated signing up. Like, I think it's 70 million or something. But like most of these people are not on Twitter. Most of them don't know anything about that. Most of them are not comparing it to Twitter. So it's like complete normies. It's like 16-year-olds in Brazil, right? Like, they're not thinking about like, do we call it a retweet? Like, they're kind of like, oh, new platform. What is this? It's part of Instagram? Like, tell me what to do here. I think that like, it's such a big, sprawling user base that, that's why it's so like basic, you know?
Explain to me, though, the case for why people that have never liked Twitter would suddenly join a Twitter copycat and find use in it. Because Twitter's been around for a while. Like, clearly the mechanics and design of that social media app are not broadly appealing to more than whatever, 200, 300 million users. So why now are they expecting people in Brazil that have shunned Twitter for, the first decade of its existence more are suddenly going to be like, oh, Thread, because I can use my Instagram handle and like auto sign up easily, is suddenly a compelling experience?
So I don't know exactly this, but I have a large suspicion. So I had like, as an eager person to test out this new app, like I had done the thing where you could like pre-order it on iTunes so that it would like load immediately at exactly 7 p.m. when it like was ready to be downloaded or whatever. Because I was excited to do that because I was following technology news and knew there was a new app coming out. But I am assuming that for most people, like I don't think most people like heard about the app and then went to the app store to go looking for it. I assume that most people opened Instagram and got a prompt saying, click to the new Threads experience. That they basically, it signed people up right from inside the Instagram app. So so it's all just like anyone who opened Instagram yesterday was sort of pushed into a funnel to join the app. And so they might have been like, I don't know, what's this? Sure. I don't know. I like Instagram. I'll do the thing.
Yeah. And like Facebook, Instagram, Meta, whatever, they can always do that. They could launch any app they wanted, put a prompt in one of their, billion plus user apps and push a not insignificant percentage of them to just sign up. It doesn't matter what it is.
And they have, but those have always kind of like flopped, right? Like this is unique in that like...
It is day 3, though.
It still could flop.
We're going to get into our predictions about what will happen. So think about that. But yeah, they have tried, what? I mean, Reels is like successful, but TikTok is certainly like way ahead. There have been other standalone apps. What was it like? It was like Slingshot or something?
Yeah,
or
like Lasso.
Paper, wasn't that one?
Like rip-offs of, Snapchat and stuff. And then they eventually, made Stories, which were successful.
But those were products within an existing app. Like, I feel like it's been rare that they actually put their whole metacy into forcing people onto another, actually downloading a full separate app.
It feels like there are like a couple things. It does feel like the contempt for Elon Musk, especially among like reporters and sort of the left and sort of the blue checks, the old blue checks, I feel like that revolt and the sort of hunger for that crowd, myself included, to like find a new, not like I'm some huge account, but to find a new home, help motivate this. And then,
which is of course hysterical because those same blue checks over the last 5 years hate Zuck, hate
That was
Facebook.
like a theme of Dead Cat. Like I feel like a lot of early Dead Cat was all about like the anti-Facebook and was sort of like the corrective.
It's a core belief of the blue checks. I mean, that's what anime.
They just have totally forgotten. It's all mood. I don't know.
Well,
I mean,
I think it's a lot of like the enemy of my enemy is my friend, right?
100%.
Clearly.
I think that is the diagnosis. I mean, so it's that. It's obviously sort of Instagram's power to get Instagram people there. And then it's also the people who are like, you got to get on a platform early and try and build followers. So I feel like it's like those three crowds like trying to coexist. Like the social media managers who need to build up their accounts in case this is the next big thing. The rebellion from Twitter. And then these sort of beautiful Instagram people who are getting sort of like told that this is a piece of the app.
I have another theory there too, because it is when you sign up for the app, the feed is all for now is purely like algorithmic and it sucks in a lot of like people you don't follow. So it's a ton of celebrities. Like the people who are like the most famous people on Instagram, like literally just who has the most, it's like J-Lo and Shakira and like Gordon Ramsay, like celebrities that aren't even necessarily the ones that you're like most interested in. I don't know. I'm interested in those celebrities, I guess. But it's just like huge followers. And I do think there's a thing too where a lot of those celebrities are excited to be on there and posting. And for now, they are. Like Paris Hilton is posting and, all these sort of celebrities. And it's a little bit cringy to watch because they're not quote unquote good at it. But I do think that there's a segment of these like traditional celebrities who had a lot of success on Instagram that never really figured out how to like transfer that over to TikTok, which is slightly more allergic to like a movie star post. It's like the Kardashians aren't big on TikTok, but like they work really well on Instagram, not on TikTok. And I think that there's probably a lot of enthusiasm from those big celebrities who have not found TikTok success and are sort of clinging on to Instagram relevancy because they know it's important for their careers to have a big social media following. And so they're probably excited to get onto this. And then, fans and regular people are excited because they see all of a sudden celebrities which haven't posted to Twitter in years. Like celebrities have left Twitter a long time ago.
I mean, Adam Mosseri or Mark Zuckerberg, I forget which one, said that they would have sort of a chronological feed and sort of a follower feed, which would be key to sort of creating some of the stuff the media likes, which is like news stuff and also just being able to follow like niche interests without being just in this normie sort of fray. I don't know. What are people's views on like, I don't know, the algorithmic feed? Like, I think the average person does want an algorithmic feed, right?
Yeah, I think so too. I think there's a reason that they've continued to have an algorithmic feed on Instagram for years is because like test after test after test always shows that that's what people actually want. I think what he was saying is like that, I mean, there's like a ton of really seeming basic features that aren't on there. There's no DMing. There's no like
search is bad, right?
I don't think so. I think you can only search for people. You can't search for like words. So it sounds like they will add more stuff, including probably, I'm guessing it would be kind of like how you could toggle between, even on Twitter, like for you versus following is probably what it would be like. That would be my guess.
Yeah.
I mean, that seems to be like a logical thing. I will say that like having used it for over a day and following some more people that are people I actually want to follow, my feed the celebrities have sort of calmed down. It's like adjusted a little bit. Like the algorithm is sort of
part of the reason you're on this podcast is for a second, like, 4 out of like 7 of the things in my feed were you at one moment. It's just like, I mean, I posted this, but it does feel like it swings from like brands to people you just followed to like models, like 1 second to the next, where it's like it almost feels like there's somebody like sitting there with a dial trying to figure out what's on it.
Well, yeah, they have no idea what they're doing right now in terms of what's going to work. So I'm sure they've got a bunch of engineers just crazily moving sliders around, trying to see like, oh, Notopoulos is big. Give more Notopoulos. And they're like, no, they don't like it. They hate it. Back off. We're losing people. But Paris Hilton.
I mean, what I did like in that first day, especially like in the morning when it was like, really no one knew what was going on and people were just logging on for the first time, I sort of realized that there was this rare opportunity where like you could post incessantly.
Right.
And like, because essentially people's feeds were quasi blank and also largely filled with like celebrities or, you know, the Betches account, like things like that, that like it would be really annoying if I did that on like Twitter. Like that is not an acceptable behavior. It would be viewed as annoying. But somehow in this like rare moment, I feel like I was able to kind of do that and like get away with it a little bit. But I was also like, I was doing a bit. Like I was like pretending that I was
that's the best. It's like, oh, I'm posting too much because that's the character I'm playing who's shameless.
Yeah, I was pretending to be the editor-in-chief of Threads. So I would be like, you know, retweeting or reposting Gary V, you know, who's kind of like eye roll, right? Like
they took down one of your posts already, right?
Yes.
What did you say?
Without looking at it in front of me, someone asked me, you know, as editor-in-chief, and it was like a little bit of a mixed bag where like, I think most of my friends knew I was kidding.
Right.
But like clearly, like also some people who didn't know me from Twitter, which at first was like mostly like people, you know, that I knew or whatever. Some people didn't, and they were like, they believed it. And that was like a little bit funny because I was also, in my opinion, posting things that were kind of obvious tells.
Right. Well, that's like a huge feature. That was always the thing on Twitter, you know, and I've gotten in fights with people about this where it's like, you know, the in-group 40% gets us the joke, but 60% of people maybe don't. And it gets traffic in part because of the confusion. But then the sort of in-group gets to laugh at the rubes who should obviously get it. And like, it's like a recurring joke at this point on this type of social network. Anyway.
So that was kind of what was happening. So some people were taking it seriously and someone said, are you going to ban the Nazis? And like, it's a legitimate question, right? Because like this has been an ongoing issue with social platforms that, you know, how they are addressing moderation issues. And I wrote back something like, Threads is, you know, we want respectful and inclusive conversation here at Threads. And so we respect people's choice to lead a Nazi lifestyle. So we are inclusive, and like heart emoji.
And they took it down.
Well, there's your answer. I mean, what's so great about a post like that is that, you know, Katie, that not low-level people had to have a discussion about whether or not to delete this and how this was you know, reflecting poorly on the brand. I would even venture to guess it went all the way up to Zuck. At this point.
No.
At this point. Not that there was an emergency meeting held, but like, you know, these decisions at the early stages are very sensitive. And there were policy people that had to come down and have discussions about your shit posting. And that's not something you will probably get to have happen again for a while.
I know.
Did they tell you? Do you have visibility into this?
A high-level executive messaged me and was like, do you have any idea how many questions I've had to answer about whether or not you actually work here?
Yeah.
I did ask Instagram if Adam Mosseri wanted to come on the podcast with you, but he declined.
It's probably for the wiser. Yeah.
I mean, the issue was Katie, not newcomer.
No, I'm blaming her, you know. Okay.
Yeah, sure.
We would have bumped Tom. No, I mean, there's so much to get into on the moderation, and I want to talk about Twitter versus Elon Musk. But this sort of like, will it succeed, I think will help. I'm curious where we're all on the spectrum of success. Because obviously, you know, Substack had notes. There was Blue Sky. There were all these Mastodon things. Like you know, and we all lived during the pandemic where like Clubhouse, which is a different type of app, but people were very convinced that that would be the next thing. And we've lived through these periods where there's sort of desperation, especially among the social media or the Twitter addicted, for like a new one and just to keep it going. So there's obviously this sort of startup energy that exists that has to play out to see. But where are you both on, you know, is this going to be bigger than Twitter? Is this going to be the Uber to Twitter's Lyft in a year?
I predict yes.
Tom?
Twitter in its current state, like not max Twitter, like not Twitter when it was at its peak in terms of users.
Like Twitter is a company today. Yeah. Like
that's such a low bar.
Yeah.
That's such a low bar. I mean, I haven't read the latest leaks on how many users, but I'm assuming it's really plummeted throughout the Elon Musk era.
I agree. I mean, so we all agree that Threads is like Coke to Pepsi, or like at least, if not, does anyone think like Twitter is like going to be more like a true social level where it's not even seen as a sort of pure mainstream social platform? Or
I don't know. I mean, I do think that if Threads continues to succeed and have lots of users and lots of celebrities or whatever, like, I do think that, I mean, like, there's going to be people who cling to Twitter because there's lots of things that Twitter can offer that Threads can't. Like, you can't really be, like, anonymous. I mean, I don't know. There's also, like, people who really care about their large followings that existed on Twitter that they, like, can't bring over. There was just, Adam Mosseri had just, like, posted about how, like, that they're not really going to imagine this as a place for news, and that they sort of see it as like, right. And so I think that, like, I mean, I know why they don't want to do that, right? Like, news and politics, like, sucks for the platform to deal with. Like, it's a bad business to be in. So, like, Twitter may still have an edge there.
One thing they've come out of the gate with is they were very like, we're going to be nice. Like, I think part of the complaint about Elon among many is just that he's been sort of like mean-spirited and sort of encouraged a mean crowd. So, Meta can just say, oh, well, this is going to be the nice platform. And, to them, I think nice also includes, like, not that sort of mean news media sort of sensibility. You know what I mean? So I'm curious what you guys think about that. And also there's this, like, broader question, I think, in my mind, which is just like, do you think fundamentally, like, sort of the personality, like these narrative questions, like the actual behavior of Elon Musk, the positioning of, like, Facebook in terms of being nice and what they're going to include, do you think that is really that determinant here? Or do you take more of the view that, like, product rules everything? It's sort of the Instagram connection, and that it's really sort of the tech hookups that matter more than these, like, big, like, personality type narratives?
I think that it's, like, a little bit of both. I think that the reason that Threads will be successful is because it's the product and it's Instagram. And most people don't know that Facebook owns Instagram still. So I don't think that people are really, the average person who's going to sign up for Threads in this, probably by the weekend will be 100 million people or whatever, is really thinking hard about, like, Zuck versus Elon.
Right.
On the other hand, the reason that people are fleeing Twitter is because of Elon. And on Twitter, everyone's aware of who he is and whether or not they like him.
I would love to see data on the percentage of the conversation that is about Elon, because it does feel like if you're on Twitter, it's just like there's a ton of Elon stuff. Like, it'd be hard to imagine just,
well, he saw to it that that's the case, right? I mean, there are all those stories. Yeah. Right. He was worried when his posts didn't get, he was his own cat turd. I mean, what's funny here is, like, if you look at the history of Facebook copycat features, they're usually in response to, like, existential threats or perceived existential threats, right? I mean, stories is the most obvious example. And if you talk to, like, the Snapchat people, they'll say that, like, what stories really did to Instagram wasn't so much like kill Snapchat, is that it stopped people from fleeing Instagram or Facebook to Snapchat. Like, it stemmed the tide of people leaving it, and that's all it needed to do. And second order effects, like, it probably slowed down its growth. But with Twitter, slowed down Snapchat's growth. But with this, like, Twitter is obviously not a threat. This was not done for any reason other than
said. Like, Zuck was like, it's sort of sad we don't have, like, a billion person, like, global, like, forum, and, like, Twitter's had its chance for, like, a long time, and now we're going to try.
Yeah, but it's also, it's just clearly, I actually think, Katie, you've talked about this before. There's just certain limitations to the text-based medium that is just not going to get, I mean, pictures are more fun. They're more globally appealing. Anyone can kind of absorb the, enjoyment through a picture more so than, like, the language and the miscommunications and all this shit that comes with text. And I just don't think at this point, however many years since the dawn of Twitter, this format is suddenly going to reach 1 billion people or appeal to 1 billion people. It's just not, there's no product fix for it.
Really?
It is what it is. It is what it is. And we're also probably past the era of billion-person social media networks anyway. Like TikTok, I mean, like, I'm no, like, social media reporter. I'm not even a great thinker about this topic, but, like, it's clear that we're in an era of, like, diffusion and social, like more niche social media experiences that are going to appeal to certain subgroups that want to experience things through this way. And so the idea that, like, this many years after the dawning of Twitter, Facebook or Instagram leaning into the product is suddenly going to create all of the fixes that these companies weren't able to do before, and now there's 1 billion people that want to use it. It's just like, it's not going to happen. And that's an unfair bar. Like, I think this is just opportunistic, like, they just kind of flicked this thing off over a couple of weeks and it's already got 70 million users. Like, that's already success for them. Don't you think?
I think one narrative that has been underplayed so far is just that this sort of TikTok algorithmic sorting could work well in like a Twitter case, right? Because they're so bite-sized that if you're really learning smartly what people want using sort of machine learning and AI, you know, you could, without necessarily relying on their followers, deliver to them what they want. Not necessarily with real-time news, but at least like over time, like what types of jokes they find funny. And so I do think starting with this algorithmic feed gives them a lot more opportunity and just sort of the sophistication of a Facebook to actually play in sort of the smart sorting in a way that Twitter's never really been capable of it. And then I'm more bullish that, you know, there's the market here, especially with Facebook's like global reach, that it could get to sort of, you know, 500 million plus, certainly. I don't know, Katie, what do you think?
It's the difference between like words and pictures, right? Like I do think there is a limit on how many people want to write text posts. I don't know about you guys, but like my like real friends, like my normie friends, like none of them are on Twitter, and like they never were. Like,
no.
and they describe this happiness and contentment they feel.
Right. I mean, like, and some of them may have like a lot of them like at various, you know, signed up sometime between like, you know, 2009 and 2012 or something, and then like read a couple posts, but like didn't find that much value in it, never had a desire to write tweets. But they're all on Instagram, and some of them post, some of them don't really post. But I think for a lot of people, they're like, I don't have like an opinion about a thing that I'm going to write, but like I want to share a picture of my dog, you know, like that just like feels more normal. So I do think there is like a limit to like how much a text-based thing can like explode. But I also think that I can see how it sort of lives nicely as like it exists alongside Instagram, because Instagram is sort of like lacking in like text stuff, which is why for a long time, a lot of the biggest meme accounts on Instagram, which were hugely followed, like the fuck Jerry kind of stuff, were just screenshots of tweets. Because people do want like funny, amusing jokes. And so those are all on Twitter. So they would consume them on Instagram. So like it makes sense that there's some connection and marriage between the two. I mean, the irony, of course, is like, what if there was like a platform where you could like write text posts and post pictures, and like that's just Facebook, like, which like no one wants anymore.
Right. I mean, there is always this undercurrent of like people just want to move to the new thing, and like, is there just sort of an appetite to sort of start anew and have something new that's cool? And if Facebook wants to stay on top, it just needs to keep sort of shifting, you know, offering new places, new ways to sort of build the norms early. Another
key factor that shouldn't be overlooked is that it's always most successful to launch this kind of app in the summertime, because that's when kids are out of school. And it's like all teenagers.
It's the Be Real of 23, for sure.
Right, exactly. Like this would not have worked if they launched it in March, like during final season. Like if this works because it's like the teenagers are allowed to use their phones at 11 a.m. when they're normally not. And that's like a huge amount of who's on these apps is like young people who normally would be in school. And so like it's right now, it's like a perfect, the timing of this couldn't have been better. Whether or not like that will totally sustain, you know, through the fall is, you know, I imagine obviously it'll slow down. But I don't see it going away like a Clubhouse necessarily.
Yeah, and also Facebook can keep this thing up and running with not a lot of work, right? Like if this thing tops out, like it'll probably get to, and then it'll you know, lose users, and it'll maybe get down to like 50, 60, 70. I think it's already at 70, but you know, these people will attrit. So like it'll get to that number, and Facebook can keep this up and running. It's probably a low cost thing to, you know, keep operating with your cloud computing costs, and maybe it has some like side order effects as like an ad platform, but for Facebook, it can just be like a hobby of a hobby, and it won't be that hard for them to keep it up and running. And that's perfectly successful. And if it hurts Elon and like whatever, you know, Silicon Valley dick measuring contest that's going on right now, like great, all the more for it.
Facebook stock, you know, the stock market does not seem to think this is a huge product. It's up like 3.1% basically over the last 5 days. So there's definitely a shrug from investors. I don't know. I'm...
Because it's not a great business. Twitter was never a good business. So if you build a smaller version of Twitter, you know, they're interested in like the long-term effects of, you know, Instagram's growth, and they're doing well right now, right? Like Facebook or Meta has been like on an upward swing this year because they've sucked up as like the ads have moved away from the bigger media companies like BuzzFeed and, flowed almost entirely into digital media, the big social media platforms. They've seen huge, tailwind effects from that. And so that's interesting to investors. Whether or not they build a semi-successful competitor to a dying social media platform like Twitter, like who gives a shit? It's totally irrelevant to investors.
I mean, it's the same story Twitter's been trying to sell. It's like home of elite culture. It's tastemakers. It decides. It's where people
apparently that's
talk
not
about,
a good
like,
business.
The succession of the worlds. Or I know. I guess Twitter couldn't make it work. These things fit together. We can do them one by one or separate. I feel like there's the free speech fight and sort of like what we actually think will happen in terms of the importance of these like global platforms. Like Katie, you've already been censored. Like Instagram did famously have like a pretty heavy hand, right? With they're very particular on the level of nudity and pretty harsh in terms of how they censor people. And it's not, Instagram never really saw itself as like this sort of free speech, like mecca, you know what I mean? And then after that, let's talk about the sort of Zuck versus Elon whole thing. But it fits into their personas and sort of this, I don't know, I guess to put a point on it, are you worried that there's a lot of especially media enthusiasm for Threads right now? And then we're going to wake up one day and it's going to be super censorious, like anti-news. And like suddenly the press is going to find themselves back on this side of like free speech and say like, hey, like Katie's making like a very obvious joke about like Nazis and we should allow some like level of sophistication. What's your view on how we're going to view Threads politically like 3 months from now?
I do think that, like, for the average user, they want a nice, clean environment. They don't want the assholes and the baddies and the paid blue check types on there. They don't like those people. Those people are mean. They're nasty. They're riffraff or whatever. So, like, the sanitized Instagram experience is good for most people.
Exactly. I mean, I've been beating my head on the Twitter thing, right? Elon has said when he was acquiring Twitter that he wanted to represent like the middle 90%, but the normie middle loves censorship, right? That was the whole sort of like video game reviews. There were Democrats, there were Republicans, everybody was for like rating things. And it's the far fringes that are like, let's have a Wild West, and so Twitter, Elon clearly preferred the sort of Wild West, but like, I agree. The vast middle is sort of like happy to not really think about speech policies.
Right. Because I think that most people aren't, in a general sense, that interested in the kind of things that are getting censored anyways. And what they really want is they don't want to deal with assholes. They don't want harassment. They don't want like random people showing up and saying mean things to them. They don't want to, blech. And I think that the Elon Musk version of Twitter was certainly an interesting experiment in expanding the definition of what free speech on a social platform should look like. I think to different opinions of how successful. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, like, I do think that, like, ultimately, like, oh no, are we all just going to be back on, like, a meta platform? Like, wait, we forgot. We hate meta. Like, it's evil. But I think that, like, compared to how bad this other thing, that we all are sort of like flocking back to like, well, there's this nice, safe experience where no one is like mean and nasty. And I'm not going to see like, some MAGA hat types.
I mean, Meta are professionals at this. They do know how to run a social media company. They do sort of think about it. They certainly they've messed up and prioritized growth sometimes above sort of caution. But yeah, Tom, what's your view?
I never have much to say on like the censorship aspect of these platforms. I think it won't really matter until it reaches some level of significant scale and influence in the broader media where we're like, oh my God, look at all the Nazis that are, coming together on Threads right now to disseminate harmful information. And
you're not worried about over censorship, or you're not worried about under censorship?
I'm just not worried about either. No one really knows how to use these platforms yet, and what the specific audience that will come to Threads ultimately will look like. So, yes, Facebook clearly knows how to turn the dial more towards censorship and pull things down. And they're obviously more worried about their broader brand as a company than they are about the success and the direction of free speech on Threads. So if they start to see that this becomes the like Proud Boys watering hole, then yeah, they'll fucking tank all of those things without a second thought about it. So no, this is not going to be the Elon Musk hour version of things. I'm kind of interested, but Katie, have you spent much time on Spaces in the last couple of months? I've heard that is like a pretty horrifying place of racist conversations and weird underground conversations.
It's sort of, it's funny because like you can go on there and see what like, you know, most people like the top space of what the moment is or whatever. And it's usually like weird people you've never heard of and often about like crypto or like hustle or that kind of stuff. I was just thinking that I think they think about censorship and like I kind of agree, like the like, you know, fighting over the, you know, 1 inch of line about can I say this word or not is like sort of irrelevant almost in the US because like all the really like horrible stuff that has happened as a result of like Facebook or whatever is in other countries where there's much lower moderation because maybe they don't have that many like contractors that speak the local language. And so, you know, there's all this crazy stuff that happens that, you know, there's a genocide because they forgot to moderate in this small country somewhere else. As far as I know, Threads is not, it's US only for now. And that's partly they can't be in Europe because of the EU GDPR stuff. But I mean, I wonder too if it's that they are going to be very cautious with rolling out globally because the moderation outside of the US is like so much harder. And that's where the real problems are.
Seems like people are going to be able to get access. I feel like people are definitely tweeting it. It's like, I'm in Europe right now. I have it. I wonder if it'll be like the age gating where it's like, you're not supposed to, you know.
Zuck is like a very key part of the early Threads experience. And he's not an interesting poster. He never really has been. I mean, I know that, you know, hardcore posters like Katie and people who really know how to do this stuff have been critical of Elon for being pretty cringe. And if you look at someone like, say, Donald Trump, who's like so good, you know, Elon really isn't very funny. And, you know, there's a lot of, you know, crying emojis that bespeak a deeper insecurity over there. But Zuck is much worse. Like if your early experience with Threads is seeing Zuck kind of in and out of stuff, they've got to turn that dial down a lot because this is not his medium at all. I wonder what's going to happen with that.
I mean, there is something weird going on with Zuck in general. Like, I mean, I think you did want to talk about the whole, like, the martial arts thing.
Right.
Like, there's a little bit of a, like, midlife crisis element going on.
But he's always, I mean, there was that, you know, the barbecue meme. Like, he's wanted to sort of be a sort of character.
But he's roundly rejected by the broader public when that happens.
But the normie thing is good for the platform. They want it to be friendly to normies. Like, in some ways, I feel like his replies mostly serve the function of pay attention to the thing I'm replying to. And even if he's sort of, like, pretty meh, it, like, draws attention to that thing because it's the CEO of the platform. And I just don't think we want another world where, like, it's the CEO of the company that we're thinking about constantly when we're on the platform, you know? That would be a nightmare. I mean, that's part of what's made Twitter so terrible recently.
You're right. Is that Elon loved Twitter so much that he needed to buy it. Whereas that's clearly not the case with Zuck here. But I'm interested in the midlife crisis conversation, if that's where this is headed with Zuck right now.
I don't read it that. I don't know. You guys.
You don't think of it. I mean, I think that it's like, I guess maybe not midlife crisis. But, you know, I mean, like, there's been some weird new things, right? Like, all of a sudden, I mean, he's done these things of like, he's had odd fascinations with new hobbies every year or whatever. But now, like, being really into martial arts is like, feels kind of like final form of like, I don't know, it's weird.
Well, it's
and,
the
like,
first one I've seen from him that, you know, is very much driven by, like, there's no broader marketing push that clearly it's a part of. Because if you look at like the previous ones, there was like, I'm going to kill my own meat, which was, I don't know, maybe there's some environmentalism behind that or connection to, you know, people who don't have insane, like, you know, he was doing that at the time that he was becoming a hyper billionaire. And so maybe he felt trying to connect to the layman, and then his learning Chinese for a year. I mean, that one's pretty, not a lot of subtext. Didn't he do it like,
I'm going to visit every state? And that was kind of like,
oh, did he?
Around,
I forgot about
yes.
That was like,
and it was around
an election cycle.
That's when everybody was saying he was going to run for president, which was like absurd.
In hindsight, yeah. I don't remember, actually. There was like a book club at some point, so he clearly didn't have a lot of good ideas that year. But no, but this one is the first one that seems, first of all, that I could see it happening for a good number of years. And, he's really putting himself out there on this one, right? I mean, fundamentally,
I think, especially as reporters, we should be cheering for these people to be out there. I mean, it's good. It's insane how much they can gobble up sort of people's attention. But I want more public figures to sort of live semi-transparent lives. I don't know. You disagree, or do you think the lives are so fake that it's like there's no public service here because we're not getting sort of a real glimpse of them?
No, I don't think it's fake. I mean, insofar as that, I think we can all agree, Zuck's like a weird guy, right?
Right, and that was the premise of The Social Network,
right? Not only that, but he's been so rich for so long, being I have a human hobby now. Is I think the funniest thing is there was that video of him doing I can't remember what martial art is. Is it jujitsu that he does? But he's doing it in a high school gym or whatever. It's clearly the weird rinky dink
Well, my favorite thing is the New York Times had this subplot in one of their stories where it's Zuck got choked out, and then they vociferously denied that. They're absolutely not. Mark wrote an email, they're no, I never got choked out,
Well, their initial source on the choked out was the ref in that match.
Yeah.
And I didn't realize this, but his determination that Zuck had been choked out was that he was in some sort of triangle arm bar or some sort of jujitsu hold, and he began snoring. And I guess that's an indication that you've been choked out, which, I'm not a martial arts watcher, but if that's a real thing, that if you're down, you just start snoring.
I don't know, that's
that was such a good story because their denial had to be he wasn't snoring, it was effortful grunting.
Yeah,
I think they had a really specific phrase for it. I think it was one of the first times that Zuck had commented directly on a story about him to the Times in years or something.
One person's snore is another person's effortful grunting. Who knows?
Yeah. But so,
there wasn't video.
He has this whole thing now where he and Elon are sort of playing at this idea that they're going to have some sort of wrestling match, which is
never going to happen.
No, it's never going to happen. And I can't tell if I can't tell how I feel about it. My gut says cringe. Is it just the play acting of I'm gonna fight you, man.
Well, I love they both have to act like the other is the one who would pull out, right? I mean,
right.
Ultimately, it was Elon's mother that he used as a pretext not to do it. We have a couple other things I want to cover before we wrap, but make a prediction or let's offer some sort of prediction about how this plays out.
Zuck versus Elon.
No,
the cage match?
Zuck versus Elon, Threads versus Twitter. Now, Twitter's threatening to sue. I don't know, any creative.
Well, I can make a strong prediction on that one. I mean, they have a history of there's a lot of saber rattling that goes on from Elon's lawyers when it comes to lawsuits. I've gotten to see that a little bit when they threatened to sue Microsoft over usage of their API and stuff like that. And Elon is not exactly a huge winner at the courts these days too. So I'm not expecting anything on there. It's hard to not see Twitter. It's funny. I was told before going on this podcast I shouldn't veer too much off of, reported material, but it's hard not to see Twitter as continuing its precipitous decline. And not just because, Threads could or could not be a huge hit. It's just the product decisions aren't getting any better. It seems business-wise.
TweetDeck literally died. I mean, it feels like they rushed it. I mean, I think that I've seen reporting that Facebook rushed this out in part because, they were doing the rate limiting with Twitter. And so people were so mad at Twitter that it was oh my God, we need to seize on this. So definitely my point of view would just be whatever happens, I feel even if, Threads wasn't super successful, the decline of Twitter is just going to continue.
It's inexorable. And they're playing not very smart games with their cloud computing bills. And, that's just ultimately going to result in more downtime, and the people that were on the fence about this thing. Like, the one thing you can't overcome is a non-usable product. Like, you can have as many, policy decisions and algorithm decisions as you want, but if the thing doesn't load and you can't post, there's not a lot going for you at that
Twitter
point.
had become a pay-to-play app. Like, basically, you paid money to them and you get to annoy everybody else. Katie, you have any predictions for the future?
Yeah, I think that like Twitter, I think it's going to get weirder in the next 6 months. Like, a lot of people are going to leave. A lot of people are going to see Threads as like a perfectly serviceable exit, that will scratch the itch for something to open on your phone when you want to read a few jokes. They'll, leave. The celebrities will probably start posting less because ultimately, like, celebrities will find it not that rewarding to do text posting. And I think, I think that Twitter will just get like weirder and weirder and more insular because you're going to be left with like only the real, like the true freaks.
The real posters.
Does that include you, Katie? I'm genuinely curious because you're so, like, you built your career in many ways, I think, on being so good on Twitter and kind of defining a certain voice there. And I sort of see someone like you being like, I'm out, as a real death knell for any version of Twitter that I ever found interesting.
Well, there certainly are people like myself who, especially like journalists who spent a decade building up a large following on Twitter so that when they tweet out their stories or whatever, people click on them. They get sources that way. Losing that is going to like suck, Like, this was a great tool for me professionally. Hopefully I will still be able to to do work without it, but
do you think you're gonna dual app, or do you have a plan yet?
I guess it's weird. It's like there's been so many moments where I've been like, this is the moment everyone's gonna leave Twitter.
Right.
I think so many people are like, I don't want to leave Twitter, but eventually the thing that will make me leave is not that one day I'm gonna say, that's it, I quit, I can't take it anymore. It's just gonna, as other people that I care about leave, it's going to be less interesting to open. And literally within
it's like the last
day,
day you see a friend that you fall, it's like a lot. You're not like breaking up, just like one day you're like,
it's a slow
hang
fade,
out with them,
right?
Anymore,
it's just
and you're like, oh, I guess that was the last one. I didn't realize.
Yeah.
Honestly,
even in the last day since Threads launched, I think the rate limiting that happened last weekend, 2 weeks ago, when people hear this, like, was that really like, I think was a big problem for, like, it became like I'm just not going to bother with this app. And so even on Twitter now, you can get real ghost town vibes that like have been being ghost town vibes for the last 6 months, but really, really now, like, I'm just not seeing that many people that I know or like posting. I can see that there's lower engagement on my own posts. Like, it's less and less fun. Eventually, it will get to the point where I don't feel like opening it as much.
All right, I want to talk briefly about each of your reporting. Katie, really, I mean, you were a diehard BuzzFeeder. I mean, you really stuck with them as things got rough, and represented some of the best of their reporting. Always such a creative and wonderful writer. I'm curious, what's your plan right now? Are you definitely staying in the reporting biz? I mean, you sort of made a joke about Ben Smith, giving you what was the wisdom Ben Smith had? He was like, oh, if you have a bunch of rebels, you give them station posts basically in the new regime so they're occupied and then they don't cause you trouble. And you were saying like, oh, now I can have the real heart of a poster. I'm not a journalist. I'm only I don't know. Is there a world where you're like, oh, this influencer world or something? I'm interested in that. Or what do you think about sort of the reporter influencer divide, and what's your ambition at the moment?
I think that I will probably continue to be in reporting, but right now, I mean, the people who have been laid off of BuzzFeed News, which is like, it sucks and it's very sad. The only upside is that because it was the entire division of BuzzFeed that shut down, it triggered, this is like so boring now, it triggered the New York WARN Act, which means that they have to keep you on payroll for an extra 3 months before your severance kicks in. So you're getting
paid to tweet on Threads. Like, that's where you're really the editor. Yeah.
I'm still a BuzzFeed employee for another month. and then I get 6 months of severance. So like I'm sort of like relaxing for right now. And I'm
That's
like
beautiful.
It's like a nice personally, I'm finding it a very nice time like to be able to like take a break. But yeah, I was sort of having this moment where I was like, oh, this is such a weird thing. Like this new app is launching and it's very squarely in what I would normally be covering. Like normally I would have been reporting and writing about this and like having to come up with a story, but I don't have to do that. So instead I like did this whole shtick about pretending to be the editor-in-chief. And also like I probably couldn't have done that if I was like actively being a reporter.
I have this whole hobby horse that, you know, the reporter class, especially, you know, which I'm a part of, which came up either through newspapers or journalism school or whatever, who believes in sort of the priesthood of, you know, journalism, is very defensive about distinguishing like the creator influencer world from journalists. Whereas I've become much more of an advocate of like, we should collapse them all and hold everybody to the same standards. You know, if you're Lex Friedman doing an interview with Mark Zuckerberg or something, you should be held to your reputation and people should pressure you to ask tougher questions and all that. And like drawing some huge distinction between, I don't know, the journalist class and everybody else is like not serving anybody. I don't know. Do you agree with that? Or like, is there a world where you would lean more into being sort of a creator who with journalism instincts rather than sort of work at a media company as a sort of traditional journalist?
I don't know. I mean, like, I think I'm inclined to agree with you in general. I think that this was a specific case where, like, I think had I been actively reporting on Threads and also purposely misrepresenting myself on Threads, that probably wouldn't have been okay to do while I was. My boss would have been like, "That's a funny joke, but you need to stop."
Right.
I could have gotten it.
But it's funny, like, and it's like you're not hurting anybody.
Yeah. I could have gotten away with it at BuzzFeed for 6 hours, I think. At the Wall Street Journal, 0 hours. You know, but I don't have a job, so I was allowed to get away for it for 24 hours.
Exactly. All right, that's a good transition. Tom, all right, you left the show. You're at the Wall Street Journal. Now you're an authority. You know, voice from God. What have you learned?
Well, since I left the show, I've been flourishing at the Wall Street Journal. I cover Microsoft and enterprise tech. Since I joined, that has basically been the AI beat, like every other reporter these days. I wrote a story about AI and the effect that it's had on the downturn that we're in right now. This is really more of a newcomer story, honestly, but I kind of took the ball and ran with it. I'd had some conversations when I was actually out in New York with some startup founders who were, you know, people who had been around the tech space for a long time. And they were telling me that this was like a weird downturn. Like they'd been through different downturns, like the dot-com bust or the 2007, you know, financial collapse. And people always talk about 2015 as being one of the downturns. I was covering tech then. I don't really remember what happened.
Well, there was a blip. There was a blip where valuation down.
A couple months maybe. Anyway, but so that was actually maybe the weirdest one of all. But the point here was like we were all expecting things to look really bleak in tech for an extended period because of, you know, whatever interest rates and the decline of all the stock prices and things like that. And then AI happened to come along and be this incredible buoyant force that propped up at least a lot of the optimism within the tech world. And look, I'm not here to say that the downturn is over and we've reached a floor and everything is on its way up, but it's at least been like a surprising turn compared to other downturns. And so I was just talking to people, investors and other, you know, startup founders who ended up raising decent
newcomer story.
Yeah, well, I didn't see it on Newcomer, so like I said, I ran with it. But
just had a chart that showed, I think, like Series C rounds sort of rebounding a little bit. Yeah, there's starting to be some evidence of private market improvement.
Yeah, the problem with all those data-driven stories, to make this even more boring, is that it's all very backwards looking, and so you don't get a good sense of what's going on right now. So I actually didn't get incredible data to back up the idea that like things are up and up, but just in terms of optimism, it was funny to hear, you know, how many people are expecting huge things out of AI right now, which, like, let's be clear, hasn't produced a ton of money so far for everyone, right? Like it's obvious.
Or what?
Yeah. I mean, like it's you know, Nvidia clearly is going to start
Thomson
cleaning up.
Reuters, I just wrote about this. Bought Case Tech's $650 million. I mean, that's a real exit. And
sure, and Mosaic exit. Sure,
yeah,
that was all in stock.
1.3.
Yeah, but the exits are there. So that's one side of it. But then, I mean, if you look at the stock prices for all of these companies. Man, this is a real departure from like the cage match between Zuck
Well, you're
and
really
Elon,
negging this, you know.
No, but I'm negging myself.
God forbid people, you know, like, you know.
This is a serious business podcast now. We don't just talk about media things. But yeah, anyway, there's a lot of optimism and expectation of what AI can do. And so the piece that I wrote was mostly about that and where that fits into like previous downturns. But I want to be clear in case people start thinking that I think that we're past the worst of things. I have no idea. It's very likely that we're going to see like bankruptcies and like a huge culling of overvalued startups that came around in the last couple of years. But AI has been like a funny wrinkle in all of this. So that was my story.
I mean, I've basically said over the last, like, I don't know, 9 months now that like it's this story of dueling narratives with like AI rounds like super up and everything else super down. I think the new turn is like some of those super down things, you know, what's happening with the rest of the market. And eventually some of the enthusiasm out of AI will cool down. But yeah, it's a weird narrative time. I mean, my last podcast was with the CEO of Techstars, who was pretty bleak. And, you know, her main point was just like venture capital funds take a long time to fail. And so I think to some degree, people get impatient to see sort of the deaths. And it's like, there's a big lagging indicator when it comes to funds in terms of the actual pain.
There's also, I find like the opportunism of this era to be interesting. And the story I wrote before that, actually, I did it with a colleague of mine, was about crypto and how a lot of the crypto miners have been trying to pivot to AI because they're stuck with these rigs now that are completely unprofitable because mining is basically dead, at least for Ethereum.
Right.
And so they're hoping that they can like somehow turn these things into AI compute devices. And it's an interesting kind of play because there's a lot of arguments about whether they're even powerful enough to do it. And it really flies in the face of like NVIDIA, which tells everyone you need to buy their like tens of thousands of dollars expensive chips in order to train your AI models. And so again, it's just funny to see the crypto people reemerging again, you know, the survivors of the last tech hype cycle to see how they can somehow make some money during this current, you know, craze that again isn't really making a lot of people, you know, revenue.
All right, Tom, great to have you back on the podcast. Katie, thanks for coming on. Excited to see what happens after this BuzzFeed paid to tweet on or paid to post on Threads.
Thank you for having me.
And there is currently an opening right now to be the editor-in-chief of Threads, right?
That's
Since
right.
you stepped down.
I've been fired. Yeah.
Okay. So if anyone wants that job, do they get in touch with you, or how do you apply for that?
I think it's mark@meta.com.
Okay. Sweet. All right. Thank you. Thanks so much for listening. I'm Eric Newcomer. Thank you to Katie Notopoulos and Tom Dotan for coming on the show. Shout out to Tommy Heron, our audio editor, Riley Kinsella, my chief of staff, and Young Chomsky for the theme music. Like, comment, subscribe on YouTube. Leave us a nice review on Apple Podcasts. And of course, subscribe to the Substack, newcomer.co. See you next week.
Goodbye, 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 goodbye.